Hi, this is Chips Enough. You're listening to Midwest Mixtape Podcast. Turn it up.
We did everything together, would have done it forever. How did we go wrong? I know that what goes up comes down. I didn't know you hit the ground. Why'd you have to give it up? Oh, you were just a little girl. I'll never look into your blue eyes. My Michelle. We did it just for a good time, a misunderstood time. We lived with
Hi, and welcome to the Midwest Mixtape Podcast, live from the Barn Studio in Southeast Missouri, joined with a living rock star legend online. We have Chip Z'Nuff. Chip, how are you today, man?
Very good. Just got back last night from our tour with Trickster, Pretty Boy Floyd, and Band Inc. for the North America region. And it was a wonderful run, and I'm glad to be home for a couple of days.
Home is Chicago, right?
Yep, that's where I do my radio show. I'm on Monsters of Rock 7 days a week when I'm not on tour. And, of course, producing records out of my studio.
And we're really excited. You're going to be coming to our town, Park Hills, Missouri, on Friday, June 14th at the Park Hills Underground. Enuff Z'Nuff with Phantom Sam, Nobody's Darling. Doors are at $7, $20 pre-sale. We're excited to have you in town, man.
It's great to come out there. It's been quite a while since I've been in Missouri. My last trip was a couple of years ago. I was out with Man Cow, of all people. He took me on a fishing excursion, and that was pretty interesting. 6 o'clock in the morning, hanging out in a little boat with all my threads on. It was 95 degrees. It's ridiculous. And we spent about 3 days out there in the woods. Never got bit up by more bugs in my life.
Yeah.
I didn't see any interesting stuff till the very end of the tour, where people were living out in the woods with bricks of cocaine and crack, or who knows what they had. It rotted their mind, no teeth. But I threw them a CD and they seemed to leave us alone. It was incredible out there. And I'm not making this up, by the way. It was one of those kind of trips you could write a whole book on that story. And I remember on the way home after, we were all talking about how crazy it was out in Missouri, and how beautiful it was as well. And we stopped at every single Dog and Suds and DQ restaurant to get food, because all the guys that were with me were all fast food champions. They're all big guys, by the way. And I definitely enjoyed them for some ice cream as well. And it was a long little cruise. It probably took me about 12 hours to drive back home from Chicago.
Do you know what area that would have been in Missouri?
No, I don't. I just know we were hanging out with the cow and all his constituents, and it was really a lot of fun. Oh, as a matter of fact, I do remember one little story that happened out there. The place we were staying, right down the street, there was a wedding party, and the band didn't show up. And we had a couple of guitars with us. We ended up playing for the wedding party. They'll never forget that.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's amazing. To have an actual rock star play at your wedding. I bet that was really a treat for them.
They seemed to love it. And I thought it was nice, too. We were accommodating them. They were in a time of need, and the band didn't show up, and we ended up pulling together a bunch of little gear and putting on a small little concert for them.
You know, you've been in the rock and roll lifestyle and in the game for so many years. What have you seen changed throughout your time in the music industry?
Well, social media is first and foremost. Everybody grabs their own music in a certain way, and most of it's through Spotify, Deezer, iTunes, Apple Play, etc. So that's been, I think, in some ways good, because everybody has access to your music. The bad, if I had to look at it, because I'm not a negative person, but if I had to look at something that in the old days we got paid for playing and making records, And nowadays, it's you have to go out and you have to find other ways. It's very challenging. So I think that's the biggest change right there is the social media exponentially has changed. We're in a time right now, too, where there's too much product and not enough demand. There's just so many great artists out there that are playing and other ones that are maybe not so great, but there's really a lot of good musicians and a lot of players out there. And it's really hard for people to navigate those waters. But for most bands, I think the positive thing that came out of it was live shows. People if they like your music and they get a chance to hear it, they'll go out and see your shows. And that's very important because you can push your music through live performances now, where in the old days, we weren't allowed to sell our records at the shows. None of the bands, because we had a deal, our record companies had a deal, and they were in bed with all those stores. So if you were playing a sound, say for instance, a band was touring in Nashville and you wanted to sell your records at those shows, well, if you did that, then your stuff would be pulled from the record stores because it was shown as a sign of disrespect. So nowadays, you're able to do it. There's still record stores out there, but it's not like it was, not as prevalent as it was in the old days. And it's cool to be able to go and see a band perform and then get an autographed CD or vinyl. Couldn't do that at the record stores, that's for sure. So maybe in that way, there's some positive elements that have definitely come through. Let's not forget about any bands that are out there, the newer bands and of course the older ones. We're all one song away from being back in the game again. And if you can find someone to help you sync your licensing of music through movies, soundtracks, TV shows, commercials, etc., that's very profitable for the artists as well. So it's a lot of competition out there, but there are ways to still become successful and be able to work and navigate.
Two things I think about in the pop culture landscape when I think about Enuff Z'Nuff is one, all your legendary appearances on the Howard Stern show and your relationship with him and how awesome and amazing those interviews were. And especially one of my favorites is when you went on with Steven Adler, when you were playing with Adler's Appetite. And then the second one is you know, you're talking about, you know, having a single and having a hit. Fly High Michelle was featured on Beavis and Butthead, and they poked fun at it, but you guys actually have it on your website. So it seemed like you embraced, you know, being on there and being a part of that. Can you talk about those two things?
Of course we do. Who cares who drives the bus? Let's get to the picnic. You get a chance to be seen by millions of people every single day. I think it's a shortcut to thinking to not feel that that's going to work to your advantage. Those Howard Stern shows were great. He's always been wonderful. Him and Gary Delabate and Fred and Robin, super nice to the band. And it's because we came in the early days before we had any success. He heard the music. He heard the new thing. That was the first thing that tripped Howard's trigger. And a shout out to Mark Snyder, Dee Snyder's brother, because he's the one who came up to me. He's a radio rep at Atco Records. He says, you ever hear of Howard Stern? I said, I've heard the name, but I don't really know about him. And he says, well, this cat reaches a lot of people, and he's really good. He loves rock and roll and heavy metal, and he's a real smart cat when it comes to music. Maybe you might want to meet him. And I said, yeah, sure, take us down there. And we went down there at 6 o'clock in the morning. They welcomed us with open arms. We played a couple songs acoustically. And after that, that was it. You know, I remember after the show, Howard took me in his small little room. It was a teeny little room, just held, you know, typewriter and some papers and, you know, a couple pictures, and that was it. It was not like a room you would think Howard would have. And of course, he doesn't have that room now because he's made a Brinks truck full of money. If he pushed him off his wall, he'd break his neck 50 times. But right. He's really down to earth and humble and just a nice cat. And we talked about older bands that we loved, like Led Zeppelin and Queen and Pink Floyd. And then he was telling me how much he loved bands like Cheap Trick. I thought that was great because we're both Midwestern bands. And I knew about Trick because I was friends with those cats. And then we got a chance to talk about our upbringing. And before you know it, we ended up going out to have a nice little dinner together a couple months later. And Dutch treat, by the way. He wasn't rich like he is now. So we all paid for stuff. But I remember bringing a guitar into the studio, and Donnie and I signed it for him. And he says, what's this? And we said, it's a beautiful guitar that we wanted to give you as for all the help you've given us. And And I thought that was really good for us. And right after that Howard Stern show, by the way, we ended up doing David Letterman, and that really helped the band exponentially because we reached a lot of people. And not only that was we got a great tour. We were with an agency called Premier, Frank Barcelona, Barbara Scott. Our agent was Locke Buchanan, and he was the guy that actually really hustled for the band and moved mountains for us. And then right after we did the first Letterman performance, we went right on tour. We never really came home after that. We just worked super hard. But we always found ourselves behind the eight ball, no pun intended. That was a struggle for us. The early days we were traveling around the van, and then it went from that to a tour bus, and we had outstanding bills, and the inmates were right in the asylum. It was a lot of peaks and valleys for Enuff Z'Nuff in those early days. To answer your second question, Beavis and Butthead, nobody wanted to be on that show. All the rock bands. Sebastian Bach called Rick Krim and wanted to fight him after Beavis and Butthead played their first video because he thought that they were taking a piss out of him. And he was calling everybody, trying to get a hold of Rick. And Rick was the guy who ran all the stuff over at MTV Network. But he had nothing to do with how people were going to react. And in that record, when they played the Skid Row record of Beavis and Butthead, when they did that segment, those guys sold 10,000 records that week. That was a great, great win for them. But Sebastian didn't like it. He thought they were making fun of him and tried to attack him. And those other artists, too, that came after MTV that were not smitten by the wonderful opportunities they had. We, on the other hand, we embraced it. And we seen right away what happened. As soon as Beavis and Butthead played that video the first time that week, our album sales went up exponentially, like 500%. And the label was like, this is really good for us, and let's take advantage of it and get back out there and do some more touring and maybe get some more radio stations to play our songs. So sometimes it's really easy to confuse motion with progress, to quote the great Herbie Herbert. I think that Beavis and Butthead was good for a lot of those bands out there and gave them a little extra time. And not only that, it elevated their perception.
You mentioned the Midwest thing, and this is obviously the Midwest Mixtape podcast. We're near St. Louis, and the Cheap Trick influence, as being, and I know you've spent some time obviously on the coast and practically all over the world, is being from the Midwest. You think that is in your blood, in your DNA? And what does that mean? I know a lot of people kind of contribute hard work to that, which you guys have definitely been throughout the years. What does it mean to sort of represent Chicago and the Midwest in that way?
I think it's a great thing to be from the Midwest. In the early days, it probably wasn't so captivating, only because record companies really weren't coming out here. You had killer bands, too. They were playing Pez Band, The Thumbs, and Off-Broadway, and those others, too, like The Kind, Life, Sex, and Death, Holland, and there's others. I apologize. I don't remember them all. I got a brain cramp, but those are a huge constituency of great musicians and wonderful songwriters out here that didn't get the breaks that I believe they deserve to this day. Wonderful songs, and they would pack them in the clubs, and then record companies wouldn't come out here. And then I like to believe Enuff Z'Nuff had a little bit to do with that. More Cheap Trick maybe because they're a Midwest band. But when we came out in 1988, got signed by Atco Records, it was really because of the catalyst was a guy named Doc McGee. Doc was managing Bon Jovi, and he had Motley Crue and Scorpions, and his brother Scott, he had Skid Row. And Doc, of course, helped that too, but Scott was the catalyst there. And they heard us recording over at Royal Recorders in Lake Geneva, an old defunct studio that everybody made records at. And he took our cassette tapes and went to Derek Shulman over at Atco, who was responsible for Bon Jovi and Cinderella, as is, and got the band a record deal. And I think after that, then it opened up a little bit, and you start seeing more bands get signed out of the Midwest. But it takes a band with some success to help open the doors for other bands. I like to believe that Enuff Z'Nuff was part of that. I'm not saying we're totally responsible for it, but we for sure had a part in helping Midwest open the doors with some record companies, because right after our success, They were flying out, and they didn't care if you were from Belfast, South Dakota, or Arkansas, or St. Louis. They were looking for good bands with strong songs and great music. And so sometimes it takes good news travels slowly, but I definitely felt that the Midwest was in our favor because of there wasn't as much competition.
I sort of have this theory that we're in a special place here because we do get a little bit of everything. We're not East Coast enough to be East Coast. We're definitely not West Coast enough to be West Coast. And they have a sound. You hear the LA rock sound, and it's a certain sound, whereas Chicago has the blues and the jazz. And even, I mean, you know, later on it would be grunge with Smashing Pumpkins and rap with Kanye West. But I think it's an influx of different sounds that sort of, you know, end up in the area. Do you think that kind of came into, like, found its way into your music?
Well, I believe that after we got signed and had some success, it definitely opened the doors for some of those other bands. Chicago's always been a source of great blues and jazz and R&B, wonderful musicians out here. But I knew that the change in the guard happened when I was in New York and I was at a club at nighttime, and we ordered a couple of Shirley Temples. We were really trying to watch our intake with alcohol. And the girl behind the bar said, "Yeah, what's the name of your band?" I said, "We're called Enuff Z'Nuff. We're from Chicago." She goes, "You guys ever hear of the Smashing Pumpkins?" And then right after that, they took off, and it was massive, and they did really well. And they're still doing with Billy Corgan, smart musician. He's got a great band and still touring, playing sheds and arenas. So, yeah, that was a change in the guard. But we still held on to our roots because we grew up listening to the blues stuff. And we love all the earlier stuff. And Paul Butterfield was the guy really was one of the catalysts over here in the Midwest, because all the bands from Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, everybody would come out and see Paul along with Muddy Waters. It was a good scene. And things have still exponentially grown here in Chicago. You got Buddy Guy's place, and the people go there, and it's jam-packed every single night. People want to see the blues. So that's a big part of our fabric here in the Midwest. But rock and roll and heavy metal have always been in the forefront as well. And you go see any concerts, there's a lot of venues here in Chicago. You know, it starts off the smaller ones, of course, with the Riviera and the Vic Theater, but then you got the Aragon Ballroom, and you got the Salt Shed right now, and then if people are playing Wrigley Field, I never imagined seeing that in my younger years. But now it's opened up. And so in a big city like Chicago, there's plenty of opportunity, and a Brinks truck full of venues for bands to go and show their wares. And there's a lot of people out here too. They want to see good shows. Lollapalooza's here every single year. It's great. Perry Farrell's done a wonderful job with his guy Gardner to put together a wonderful package where it's pretty much a potpourri of hard rock, heavy metal, pop, all kinds of different EMD. So, you know, it's really good right out here in Chicago, and some of the other cities I'm sure have that too. But right here, it's pretty special. You can see anything you want any time of the year, and it's 24/7, 365 days a year.
This is a Midwest Mixtape podcast, joined here with Chip Z'Nuff, the legendary Chip Z'Nuff of Enuff Z'Nuff. And next Friday, June 14th, he's going to be at the Park Hills Underground with Phantom Sam and Nobody's Darling. Doors are at 7 p.m. and you get that $20 pre-sale. Chip, what can the fans expect next Friday at the Park Hills Underground? What can we expect, the audience?
It's an R-rated rock and roll show. You get a potpourri of different material from Enuff Z'Nuff through our catalog. Of course, on the last tour, we focused on earlier stuff, the first 4 or 5 records, but we mix it up. We have, I think it's a great set this year. Since we've been out with Trickster and Pretty Boy Floyd, we wanted to play not only the rock stuff, but the pop stuff too as well. And with, you know, over 20 albums out, which is hard to believe. I'm talking to you right now, over 20 Enuff Z'Nuff albums out. I think that says a lot. And you can't get to all that material because you only get an hour and a half, 2 hour set. And their songs are 3-4 minutes long. But we try to mix it up. So they'll get a chance to hear early material. They'll get the hits and the Baby Loves You and Fly Michelle, a new thing that started all off for us. But we have Wheels in the set off there, Enuff Z'Nuff 7. And we got some of those Beatles songs in there too from our Hard Rock Night records. So, you know, Eleanor Rigby maybe, or Jet, or Magical Mystery Tour, or a little hub for my friends, and we do some stuff off Animals and Human Intelligence as well. Maybe Rock and World or Love Train. We've been playing Love Train a lot in the set. So I just hope that everybody gets a chance to come out and you want to hear a real rock show of 4 guys that can sing and play, and you celebrate some of the years that Enuff Z'Nuff has been together playing. Quintessentially, I think some of the strongest hard rock and heavy metal you could imagine out there, because we got a lot of influences. And you show a band without influence, I'll show you guys who haven't written one note. And we're always compared to Beatles and Cheap Trick and Queen, but I think we have our own sound, and that might have been a problem in the earlier days because it was hard for journalists and radios to pinpoint exactly what our style was. And, now we've been lumped in with the Def Leppers and the Guns N' Roses and the Poisons and bands with the hair metal. And, we got long hair, but I don't think we're a hair metal band whatsoever. But Herbie Herbert, my old manager, who managed Journey for years, along with Mr. Big and Roxette and Extreme, and I should say Europe, he always said, call us what you want, just as long as you call us. So it'll be a great rock show. We come out there and you get a chance to see a live band in a live setting, and there'll be no guys underneath the stage playing the instruments for us. It'll be us live, and I think it'll be a real celebration of rock and roll. I'm looking forward to seeing the people out in Missouri because they know rock and roll heavy metal.
Friday, June 14th at Park Hills Underground, Enuff Z'Nuff with the legend himself, Chip Z'Nuff, with Phantom Sam, Nobody's Darling. Doors are at 7. $20 pre-sale, and then you can get tickets at the door if they're still available. Looking forward to having you in town and can't wait to connect with you when you get here.
Phantom Sam, I heard about those cats. The manager carries a bindle in his pocket, and Nobody's Darling, they'll try to steal all the trim, but trust me, I'll be there when it comes to all those crossing the T's and dotting the I's. We got that. We're ready to go, bro.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, man. God bless you and your family. See you at the show.
Thank you.